This 1879 photograph appears tender at first glance. Two young girls seated closely on a wooden porch, sunlit, smiling softly as if sharing a private joke. One girl, dressed in a lace-trimmed pale dress, keeps her arm gently around the shoulders of the other, who wears a simpler cotton frock. At a distance, it looks like a moment of innocent childhood friendship frozen in time. But when researchers began examining the original print more closely, they uncovered a disturbing truth hidden beneath its surface, one that had been deliberately concealed for over a century. The image resurfaced when it was anonymously donated to the Richmond Heritage Museum in Virginia, accompanied by a short and signed note: "For the sake of truth, do not let history forget her." Museum staff initially believed it to be just another post-Civil War family memento. But the moment conservation experts placed the photograph under magnification and enhanced early colorization traces, they noticed something chilling: marks around the wrists and ankles of the darker-skinned girl. Marks that resembled scars. Scars consistent with restraints. This wasn't simply a friendship portrait. It was evidence. Evidence of a reality someone had tried very hard to rewrite. What followed would unravel a painful story of an enslaved young girl whose existence had been erased from official family records. A story of forced separation, forbidden connection, and a family legacy built on a lie. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to Grave of the Shadows for more hidden history investigations that reveal the truths the world tried to bury. And tell me in the comments, should artifacts that expose uncomfortable history always be made public? What you're about to learn will change the way you look at this photograph forever. The photograph arrived at the Richmond Heritage Museum in a plain, unmarked envelope. No return address, no donor information, just the faded 5x7 image wrapped carefully in brown archival paper. It was early March of 2024, and the museum's curator, Dr. Naomi Ellis, had been cataloging routine Civil War-era donations all week. Most submissions were predictable: family Bibles, war medals, brittle letters, and sepia portraits of rigid families posing formally in drawing rooms. But this photograph felt different the moment Naomi touched it. The image was unusually well preserved for its age. The wood frame edges showed signs of being reattached, suggesting it had once been removed, hidden, and later reassembled. On the back, a faint pencil inscription read only: "Summer 1879, Fairgrove Estate." Fairgrove. The name struck a distant chord. Naomi recalled it belonging to one of Virginia's old plantation families, wealthy landowners whose records were both extensive and selective. Many such estates had rewritten their post-slavery narratives to appear progressive or benevolent, often omitting darker truths. The girls in the photo appeared to be around 8 or 9 years old. The white child's dress was clearly tailored, decorated with fine embroidery and small mother-of-pearl buttons, luxuries not common in post-war households unless money or status remained. The other girl's clothing, though neat, was plain and hand-stitched. Yet, despite the obvious difference in class, their closeness felt genuine. Their knees touched. Their fingers intertwined slightly. Their smiles were soft, not posed but familiar. Why would a family preserve such a photo, yet mail it anonymously over 140 years later? Naomi didn't know it yet, but this seemingly sweet image would lead her into an investigation that would challenge everything she thought she understood about post-slavery childhood relationships in the American South. Later that afternoon, Dr. Naomi Ellis carried the photograph into the museum's conservation lab, a sterile, softly lit room equipped with magnification tools, spectral imaging scanners, and preservation equipment. Naomi had examined hundreds of 19th-century photographs throughout her career, but something about this one urged a closer look. It wasn't only the mysterious note or the anonymity surrounding its arrival, it was the atmosphere of the image itself. The more she stared at it, the more uneasy she felt. She began a basic surface assessment first. Under a low-powered magnifier, Naomi traced the girl's outlines, studying the fabric textures, posture, and the porch background. The wooden boards behind them bore faint carvings, tiny initials or marks that had been scratched into the railing. Children often carved names or symbols where they played, but these markings were unusually deliberate, as though someone had tried to etch something into the scene. Naomi logged her observations and turned to the photo's physical composition. The photographic paper type, along with the faint sepia tone and coating, confirmed an approximate development date between 1878 and 1882, consistent with the inscription on the back. However, one detail didn't match typical portraits of that era. The girls weren't dressed for a formal sitting. Most surviving images from the period were staged studio portraits. But this looked candid, intimate, almost like a moment someone wasn't meant to capture. Then Naomi noticed a subtle irregularity around the darker-skinned girl's left wrist, an area where the photograph surface appeared disturbed. A nearly invisible smudge, as if something had once been retouched, erased, or covered. She adjusted the lighting angle, watching the reflective coating shift across the print. There was definitely something beneath the surface. Her pulse quickened. Photographs from the late 19th century were sometimes altered to hide scars, injuries, or details considered improper for public display. But why would someone attempt to conceal part of a child's wrist? Naomi felt the first whisper of a deeper truth, one she could no longer ignore. The following morning, Naomi decided to run a more advanced analysis. She carefully placed the photograph beneath the museum's multispectral imaging device, a tool capable of highlighting pigments, retouching, and underlying alterations invisible to the naked eye. If anything had been modified on this photo, the scan would reveal it. As the machine hummed to life, the first series of images appeared normal. But when Naomi adjusted the wavelength to infrared reflectance, the software began separating the original photographic layers from later modifications. Slowly, faint outlines emerged, subtle but unmistakable. Around the darker-skinned girl's wrists were faint oval shapes, slightly darker than the surrounding skin tone. Naomi leaned closer, her breath stalling. She switched filters, enhancing contrast. The marks sharpened. Not smudges. Not damage. Scars. Circular scars. The kind caused by friction, pressure, or restraint. A chill ran down her spine. Children who had been enslaved before emancipation, especially those assigned household duties, were sometimes subjected to restraint as punishment or control. Though the Civil War had ended in 1865, illegal child bondage, forced servitude, and apprenticeships, disguised as labor contracts, continued well into the 1870s and 1880s, particularly in the South. Many plantation families simply rebranded their control to evade legal consequences. Naomi's hands trembled as she captured the scans. She enhanced the ankle area next, and her heart dropped. The same scars appeared there too. 4 symmetrical marks. 2 on each ankle. Someone had tried to cover them, likely decades later, with retouching ink used to soften undesirable imagery in family photographs. But the scars were still there, hidden beneath layers of time, ink, and silence. This photograph wasn't just a keepsake of childhood companionship. It was a silent witness. Proof of a child's suffering that someone long ago had attempted to erase, literally. Naomi swallowed hard, staring at the screen. Why would a family preserve such a photo, yet alter it? And who had finally decided to reveal it now? One thing was clear, she couldn't investigate this alone. Recognizing the gravity of what she had uncovered, Naomi reached out to someone she trusted with delicate historical cases. Dr. Layla Thompson, a respected historian specializing in post-emancipation transitions and the treatment of formerly enslaved children in the Reconstruction era. Layla had earned a reputation for exposing buried truths that many institutions preferred to avoid. By late afternoon, Layla arrived at the museum. Naomi spread the scans across the lab table, each image more unsettling than the last. Layla studied them silently, her jaw tightening as she examined the circular scars around the young girl's wrists and ankles. "This is not incidental," Layla said finally. "These aren't injuries from play or accidents. These marks are patterned. Intentional. Someone restrained this child. And the retouching, likely done in the early 1900s, was an attempt to hide the evidence." Naomi felt a heaviness settle in the room. But why keep the photo if it exposed something so shameful? Layla exhaled slowly. Because photographs are powerful. Families frequently kept images tied to painful secrets, guilt, or control. Sometimes to preserve a narrative they wanted to believe. And sometimes because one person, just one, refused to let the memory disappear. She picked up the original photo, examining the faint scratches etched into the porch railing behind the girls. "You see these markings? Kids often carve their initials or codes into wood. But these look deliberate. A message perhaps. Hidden in plain sight." Naomi stared at the scratches with new intensity. Could the girls themselves have left a clue? Layla glanced at her. If these scars are real, and if this photo was intentionally altered, then we're not just looking at family history. We're looking at an attempted cover-up. The investigation had officially begun. With fresh urgency, Naomi and Layla prepared a high-resolution digital scan of the photograph's background, specifically the wooden porch railing behind the two girls. If those scratches were more than random marks, enhanced imaging would reveal it. Naomi zoomed in gradually, adjusting contrast and edge detection filters. At first, the carvings seemed like childish doodles. But as the sharpening software refined the image, the scratches began to form shapes, letters. Not one but two sets carved side by side. E-H. And just beneath it, smaller, uneven, A. Layla inhaled. Initials. Likely the girls' names. The larger lettering was carved with confidence. Older or taught. The smaller, shakier. Someone learning to write. But the most disturbing part wasn't the initials. Next to them was a symbol, a small chain link. Two circles connected. A child wouldn't casually carve that. Before they could process the meaning, Naomi layered the image against the infrared scan. Her eyes widened. There's something else. On the original photograph, near the darker-skinned girl's right forearm, something was removed. Using pixel reconstruction software, Naomi reversed the retouching. Slowly, the erased object reappeared, a thin leather strap, looped around the girl's wrist. A restraint. Not scars from the past, restraints present at the moment the photograph was taken. Layla's voice was barely above a whisper. Someone photographed her while she was still bound. A sickening realization formed. This wasn't a sentimental keepsake. It was documentation, either of dominance or of guilt. And the fact that someone later attempted to erase the strap, soften the scars, and preserve the photo only after altering it, suggested a struggle between burying the truth and preserving it. Naomi sat back shaken. Someone wanted this image hidden. Someone else wanted it remembered. If the initials were indeed the girls, then they had left a message on the porch that only the future could decipher. The photo was no longer just evidence, it was a cry for help across time. To understand the truth behind the photograph, Naomi and Layla needed to trace the origins of the Fairgrove estate. They began with archived census records, land ownership documents, and plantation registries from the 1860s through the 1880s. It didn't take long for a name to appear repeatedly, a name tied to wealth, power, and a carefully curated legacy. The Hayes family. Fairgrove Plantation, located just outside Culpeper, Virginia, had been owned by Colonel Jonathan Hayes, a former Confederate officer known for his uncompromising views and refusal to accept the social changes brought by the end of the Civil War. Many plantations had crumbled after emancipation, but Hayes managed to retain land, labor, and influence through legal loopholes and manipulation of the apprenticeship system, a post-war practice designed to keep formerly enslaved children bound to their former enslavers under the guise of training. The white girl in the photo was confirmed to be Eleanor Hayes, the colonel's only daughter, born in 1871. Eleanor's childhood was described in family records as lonely but privileged. She had no siblings and few companions her age, at least according to official documentation. But Layla found something else in an 1870 plantation birth ledger, brief but impossible to overlook. Under the section listing enslaved births for the year 1871, a single line appeared. Alma, born to Ruth, house servant. To remain in domestic care. Alma. The initial A carved beneath Eleanor's. The second girl in the photograph. Alma and Eleanor had been born only weeks apart. And like many enslaved children before emancipation, and many black children forced into apprenticeships after it, Alma's fate was predetermined. She was assigned to serve Eleanor from infancy. She would eat near her, sleep in the same nursery, and be raised as a companion, not a friend, not an equal, a possession trained to comfort, entertain, and attend to the white child of the house. Yet history repeatedly showed that children, untouched by societal prejudice in their earliest years, sometimes formed genuine bonds before adults forced divisions upon them. It wasn't uncommon for enslaved or bound children raised alongside their enslavers' children to grow attached, to laugh together, play, make up games and secrets, until adulthood tore them apart. Fairgrove's housemaid diary entries from 1876 to 1879 referenced Eleanor and Alma constantly. Eleanor will only sleep if Alma is nearby. Girls play on porch again today, whispering. Alma punished for answering back while defending Miss Eleanor. There it was, proof of a childhood relationship that defied the rules of the household. As they read more, a pattern emerged. The two girls had grown close, far closer than Colonel Hayes would ever allow. And by 1879, the year the photograph was taken, their bond had become a silent threat to the hierarchy he fought to preserve. The stage was set for a painful unraveling. If the photograph and scars hinted at a hidden truth, the written words of the girls themselves would confirm it. Naomi and Layla contacted the Virginia Historical Society archives, requesting access to any surviving correspondence tied to the Hayes family or the Fairgrove estate. Weeks later, an archivist reached out, There was a sealed bundle within the Hayes collection marked private, not for public display. Inside were 2 sets of writings stored separately, a collection of small folded notes in a fragile cloth pouch and a partially preserved journal with a worn floral cover. The archivist handled them carefully. They were fragile, ink fading with time. The pouch held 5 small notes, each written in a child's delicate hand. The archivist believed they had been smuggled out of Fairgrove by a housemaid after Eleanor's mother died in 1880. The earliest note, dated June 1878, was from Eleanor to Alma. "Alma, father scolded me again for letting you sit beside me at supper. I don't care what he says. You are my closest friend. Meet me at the porch after sundown. We can watch the fireflies." Another, written months later in Alma's uneven handwriting, revealed fear behind their innocence. "Miss Eleanor, Madam says I must call you Miss. I do not wish to. You are Ellie to me. They say I am not meant to be your friend. But I do not understand. Did I do wrong?" Alma had signed it only with an A, likely to avoid punishment if found. But the diary entries were the most haunting. The faded journal belonged to Eleanor's mother, Margaret Hayes, a different name from the competitor's script. Margaret had documented household life and the behavior of her husband and daughter. As Naomi read, her throat tightened. From February 1879. "Jonathan grows furious when he sees the girls together. Alma is bright, kind, and gentle with Ellie. Yet Jonathan says a child born to a servant must learn her place. He has threatened to send Alma away if Ellie continues to cling to her." Then came the final entry mentioning the girls explicitly, dated August 1879, shortly after the photograph was likely taken. "Jonathan discovered the photograph today. He shouted that it was disgraceful, that Ellie sat with the servant child as an equal. He struck Alma across the face when she cried. Ordered the straps brought out. I tried to intervene. He said if Ellie sees Alma again he will have the girl removed permanently. I fear what he intends. I fear we are losing our humanity." Margaret's diary ended abruptly 2 weeks later. No further entries. No explanation. But one final note remained in the cloth pouch and signed, shaky as if written in haste. "They say I must leave before sunrise. Ellie tried to stop them. I hear her crying. I'm scared. I do not know where they will take me. Alma's last message." Proof that the photograph captured their final moment together. The fragments of letters and diary entries painted a heartbreaking picture, but Naomi and Layla still needed to confirm what happened in the hours after Alma was forced to leave Fairgrove. For that, they turned to county records, church registries, and post-emancipation labor logs, documents that often held the cruel truth families worked hard to hide. Their search led them to a faded register of apprenticed minors, held at the Culpeper County Courthouse. Hundreds of children, mostly black, had been bound to white households well into the 1880s under contracts claiming to teach them skills. In reality, these apprenticeships were legalized extensions of slavery disguised as labor training. There, on page 14 they found it. Alma, age 8, transferred to Mr. Silas Winton of Danville. Term, 10 years. No mention of family consent. No guardian signature. Just a cold transfer of ownership, approved and stamped by the county judge. Layla closed the book slowly. She was taken in the night and sold off as labor. Not adopted. Not offered opportunity. She was trafficked. But another record, the one beside it, hit even harder. Removal initiated by request of J. Hayes, citing inappropriate attachment between child and employer's daughter. Colonel Hayes had Alma removed not because of misconduct, but because his daughter cared for her. Eleanor's mother tried to intervene, but her diary hinted at her limited power in the household. Local church records showed she fell ill and passed away only months later. Eleanor, now motherless and forbidden to speak of Alma, was sent to boarding school the following year, likely to sever any lingering connection. It became painfully clear. The photograph wasn't taken to preserve a memory, it was taken as a goodbye. Eleanor and Alma had carved their initials, sat for the picture, and captured the last moment before they were ripped apart. One child was forced into years of labor, stripped from the only person who loved her. The other was left with a memory forbidden to exist. The tragedy was not just in their separation, but in how violently history had tried to erase it. The next phase of the investigation was the most difficult, piecing together what became of Alma and Eleanor after their forced separation. Childhood bonds like theirs rarely survived the harsh realities of the post-war South, especially when law, race, and power intervened. Their paths diverged violently in 1879, and the years that followed told two very different stories. Historical labor census records show that Alma remained in Danville under the apprenticeship of Silas Winton until at least 1886. Winton was a tobacco merchant known for exploiting black child labor. Apprentice children under him reported brutal conditions, long hours, physical punishment, and no wages. Though Alma's name appeared only 3 times in those records, each entry listed her as obedient, quiet, compliant. Words that, in that era, often reflected survival, not behavior. After 1886, her trail grew faint. But one document stood out, a marriage record from 1891 listing Alma Carter marrying a railway porter named Daniel Carter in Lynchburg. The age matched, and so did a small handwritten note beside her name. Formerly of Culpeper. Alma had survived. She had built a life, modest but hers. Eleanor's life took a different course. Colonel Hayes sent her to a girls' finishing school in Richmond in early 1880. She returned to Fairgrove at 16, a changed young woman, quiet, withdrawn, described by family letters as easily saddened, and prone to solitary wandering. In 1892 she married a banker, Henry Caldwell, and moved to North Carolina. She had children, upheld social expectations, and lived comfortably. Yet one detail emerged repeatedly in letters written by Eleanor to her cousin. I dream of the porch often. Of a summer day I cannot speak of. I lost something no one understands. Despite privilege, Eleanor carried a grief she could never publicly name. 2 girls separated by force. 2 lives shaped by that single act. One endured hardship to survive. The other lived with a sorrow she was never allowed to acknowledge. Nearly a century and a half after Alma and Eleanor were torn apart, their story surfaced again through a digital genealogy database. While cross-referencing the Hayes and Carter family lines, Layla discovered a living link. Ava Carter, a high school history teacher in Atlanta and a direct descendant of Alma Carter. Meanwhile, public records confirmed that the surviving branch of the Hayes family still lived in Virginia. Among them was Henry Hayes, an architect and Eleanor's great-great-grandson. Naomi and Layla contacted both families. At first, Henry hesitated, unsure whether to reopen painful history tied to his family name. Ava, however, didn't hesitate at all. She wrote back, "If my ancestor's voice was silenced, I'll make sure the world hears it now." 2 months later, they met at the Richmond Heritage Museum, the same place where the anonymous envelope had arrived. The restored photograph hung on the display wall, now accompanied by digital scans showing Alma's scars, the hidden initials, and the diary excerpts that had survived decades of concealment. Henry stood quietly before it, his expression conflicted. "I grew up hearing stories of my family's honor," he said softly. "No one mentioned this." Ava folded her hands. "Because people prefer comfortable stories. But comfort doesn't bring justice." There was no shouting, no forced reconciliation, just a shared, uneasy silence between descendants of 2 girls once separated by law and fear. Naomi broke it gently. "You both stand here today because one ancestor endured, and the other remembered." Henry nodded slowly. "What if we told this story together? A scholarship, perhaps, in Alma Carter's name, so young women can study the history that was hidden." Ava considered him for a moment. "Then it has to tell the whole truth. The chains, the scars, and the love. No editing this time." They shook hands beneath the glass case holding the photograph. A moment of quiet accountability, not redemption but recognition. For the first time in 145 years, descendants of Fairgrove's 2 little girls stood side by side, giving voice to the silence that history had buried. The 1879 photograph now rests behind museum glass, illuminated softly, no longer hidden in an attic, no longer altered to comfort those who feared the truth it held. Visitors stand before it in silence, studying the 2 little girls frozen on that summer porch, unaware that the camera was capturing the last moment they would ever sit beside each other. Some linger longest on the enhanced scans, where the erased strap and scars appear, silent witnesses that refuse to disappear, even beneath ink and time. But the most powerful image is not the one taken in 1879. It is the moment, 145 years later, when 2 descendants, Ava and Henry, stood before the photograph together, acknowledging a truth their ancestors were denied. Alma and Eleanor never had the chance to choose their ending. History chose for them. Yet today their story is finally spoken, taught, and preserved. Because silence is how injustice survives. Memory is how truth fights its way back. As students visit the exhibit, Ava often points to the initials carved into the porch railing. H and A. 2 children's attempt to leave proof that they existed, not as mistress and servant but as friends. The world erased them, she tells her students. But look closely. The truth was always there, waiting for someone to see it. Some chains rust. Some break. But the ones made of memory endure, and remind us to never look away again.